My parents completely discarded me and missed every moment of my life for my brother, so I purposely did not tell them that the unmovable event they were missing now was my wedding. So I have a younger brother, Mike. He is the definition of a man-child and a mama boy, always complaining and expecting others to bow to him. Just, overall, a-hole. Ever since he was born, my parents fussed over him for everything. He's not special needs or had a traumatic birth or anything of the sort. He was just born, and my parents completely discarded me, my mom especially. She went from a loving mother to one of those boy moms people make fun of on the internet. My father still showed me love and support, but he's always been too much of a coward to stand up to my mother and let me win at least once. The only one who stood up for me was my grandpa, who always called my parents out on their bullshit, and never liked my brother. I reminded him of his late wife, my grandma, and we have a very special bond, but he lives on the other side of the country, and I could never see him often. Mike knows our mom prefers him and loves to shove it in my face. Because of this and his behavior, we've always been at odds. He's spoiled, a brat, and an awful human. I can't remember how often I got in trouble for things I did better than him or for things he framed me with. His only talent are his football skills. He won a scholarship to a nice college out of state. My parents didn't spend a dime on my education because my fund had been used to cover expenses after a fire, just for me to discover years later that money was given to Mike to buy a car and a house. It was at the public university that I met Lucas. He was the first person I was drawn to there. Of course, I met new people who are now my dearest friends, and thanks to them and Lucas, who was my best friend for years before we got together, I managed to move out of my parents' house. Lucas and I are well known in our fields and have very good salaries. Now, to the main issue. Lucas proposed to me a year ago. We're very private people, so we didn't post it on social media or anything, and when I told my parents, they dismissed it with a "that's nice." I'm starting to think they downright didn't listen to me at all. We wanted a nice but simple ceremony and reception with our friends and relatives. Lucas convinced me to invite my parents and brother, but they never responded to the invite. Whenever I visited and began to talk about my wedding, without mentioning it was a wedding, my mom would always speak over me and about my brother's accomplishments and wild adventures. At one point, I got fed up with it, and interrupted my mom to tell her that there was an event I was planning to organize whose date was unmovable. She told me they couldn't attend because my brother was playing the last game of the season that same day and wanted them to be there. Of course, this favoritism didn't surprise me. They missed my ballets, shows, and my high school and university graduation for things about him. At this point, I wanted to be petty. I told both my parents that it wasn't a problem to miss this event, purposely omitted that it was my wedding, and didn't insist further. Flash forward to a few weeks ago, I got married. It was perfect. My family, Lucas' family, and our friends were all there, and we had a blast. My grandpa was happy to give me away, and it was just perfect. My relatives repeatedly asked me why my parents weren't there with us. I was honest and said they had my brother's game to attend and couldn't attend. They gave me a few looks, and my grandpa was visibly angry for a while, but otherwise, nothing strange happened. After the reception, Lucas and I left for our honeymoon and were phone-free for the whole trip. But once we got back, we discovered that a poop storm was welcoming us home. I turned my phone on and could not even unlock it before a storm of notifications popped up. Most of them were from my mother and brother. Mike called me all sorts of nasty names and insulted me because one of my paternal aunts posted the photos of the wedding on Facebook and captioned it, with a very obvious dig at my parents, especially my mom, for missing the wedding. The post went viral in my parents' community, and they've been publicly shamed for their mistreatment of me. It also turns out that my grandpa personally visited my parents to go on a tirade to shame my father, his son, to the point of tears. This seemed to be my father's breaking point because he was so distraught for missing his only daughter's wedding and for his father's disapproval that he finally rebelled against my mom and threatened divorce unless she made it up to me. I think that's why my mom has been spamming my phone with messages, at first insulting and threatening and then downright pitiful, full of begging and pity parties. Now, I'm at home with my husband, deciding how to approach the situation. Most of my relatives, even those I didn't invite to the wedding, reached out to apologize for what I went through and to claim they had no idea this was happening at home. Still, my mom's sisters and friends are belittling me for not telling my mom about the wedding because now she's inconsolable at the thought of having missed my wedding. I think she claims that to save face, but I'm unsure. The latest messages from my father and mother seem extremely saddened and hurt for missing my wedding. Now, my family is divided on three fronts: the majority who is sticking by my side, my maternal aunt shaming me for hurting my mom's feelings, and my maternal grandparents who are adamant that I forgive my mom in light of her atonement. My best friends are telling me not to listen to them.
My wife and in-laws are excluding me from expensive family dinners and telling me that I stress everyone out for being boring. Now they are all leaving my house. I have been married to my wife for almost 3 years. 2 years ago, I moved to the other side of the country for my wife's job. She and her family are from the Middle East. Her sister lives in the next state over. Each visit, they go to dinner/brunch as a family at a nice place without me. It made me uncomfortable and disrespectful, especially considering they were staying here. This continued to happen with every visit. I expressed my increasing discomfort and anger with each occurrence. Cue the current visit. They are to be here at our home from Thursday to Tuesday. After work, at 7:45, I go out to the deck to smoke and decompress. 8:25 p.m. Mother-in-law comes to the deck and tells me the dinner reservation is at 8:30 and to get ready. No one told me anything. I go upstairs, and my wife is getting ready in a room. I asked her why she didn't tell me about dinner. She responded, "You could have asked, couldn't you?" I tell her this is incredibly rude. She said this was about father-in-law's birthday. I go to my desk for more work and ask my wife to let me know when she's done getting ready. Sister-in-law and wife both pass behind me while getting wife ready, not saying a word. I then hear them go downstairs and the front door closing. I go downstairs, and they're gone. I called my wife 4 times. No answer. I am seething. I drive to cool off and get a call from my wife 20 minutes later. I explain why she didn't say anything to me about how they all ditched me and how this is extremely disrespectful. She says, "Oh, okay, I'll tell them you said so." They get back at 11 p.m. Sister-in-law asks if I ate. I said yes, even though I didn't. Father-in-law looks at the TV and asks if I'm watching X. I curtly say yes. They say goodnight and go to bed. Saturday morning, I get breakfast. I took extra time because I wanted to be anywhere away from them. I get a message from father-in-law. "We are making brunch for everyone." My wife texted asking where I was. I didn't reply. Father-in-law and mother-in-law are in the kitchen saying brunch is ready and to please eat. I tell them, I ate, before heading upstairs to my desk to play for the first time in months. My wife comes and says something, but I can't hear her. 6:30 p.m. I go downstairs to heat food. Sister-in-law is on the couch. Wife, mother-in-law, and father-in-law walk downstairs. No one says anything to me. My wife is on the stairs when she yells, "Is everyone stressed out and quiet because of that rude, boring, buzzkill? Don't let that fat poss ruin your day." I respond, "Oh, look, it's a talking garbage can. Hey Oscar." Sister-in-law looks at me and throws up her hands. I continue to eat my sandwich as everyone leaves. My wife texts me that mother-in-law is crying in the car because of how uncomfortable I made all of them. They are all leaving, wife included. I said their leaving was completely fine by me and that they were the ones who showed the disrespect first. They are all leaving tomorrow morning for a lake resort for the remainder of their time. Ada? My son's fiancée develops a fantasy that she is my actual daughter. Now she demands that I walk her down the aisle and lie in my speech that I love her. I have 2 kids with my ex-wife, John and Sally. I'm remarried to my wife. My son is engaged to Abby. She seems nice but has been a bit pushy in trying to create relationships with my wife and me. Abby isn't close to her family. She told us many stories about why, and while some of her complaints don't seem awful, it's not my place to judge, and I didn't live it so I can't know anyway. We've tried to be welcoming, but Abby has forced her way into some family traditions that she wouldn't have been invited to. She has been calling Sally sis since they were only dating a few months, has an odd sister/mother-in-law thing she does with my wife, and the one I'm not a fan of, wants me to be like father to her. Not because we've clicked or anything. We are very different people, not saying that in a bad way. Just saying it's not based on how we get along or anything. My kids and I have a tradition when they come over that we have a private catch-up in my office before they leave. Abby asked if we could talk, and after I explained the tradition, John later asked if I would do it, saying she'd never had a caring conversation with her dad. We compromised that I didn't include her in the tradition but did join the 2 of them for coffee and let her talk. Then she started calling me dad. They weren't even engaged yet. John pulled me aside and begged me to give her that. He laid this whole thing on me about me always being the dad she always wanted right in front of her, and she just wanted that. She told me she cried watching Sally and me together. I didn't like it, but I did feel bad. So fine. I gave her that. She wants me to walk her down the aisle in the father/daughter dance. I don't want to walk her down. I walk with a cane, so dancing is hard. At my wedding, I only danced twice. John is begging me to do one, preferably in the aisle. They came over on Sunday. John and I were talking, and I thought I would address it when Ab walked in without knocking, asking if he'd told me yet. I asked what. John said she wanted me to say something about having a second daughter now in my speech and how I loved her. I just looked at him. She asked if I'd do the walk and dance for Sally. I said of course. She yelled she's my daughter too, and I said it will never be the same. Sally is my actual daughter. I tried to explain that I'd talk about her being a happy addition to the family and that I love how happy she makes Jack, which I thought was a good compromise, but she started crying. John apologized, and they left, but he called me when they were home, nearly begging me to. Update, on Mother's Day, my kids and their partners visit my ex-wife. So it turns out my ex-wife and Abby are much closer than I had imagined. She calls her mom, which is part of where this comes from. Also, my ex has been egging it on. On Mother's Day, they were talking about the wedding, and I guess whenever Abby referred to me, it was as a dad. My son told her to let it go, which led to yelling. Abby said she deserved to be my daughter, and my ex told her she was right. However, Sally told her I only had one daughter, which was a response to Abby saying that as my daughters, they should be united. A couple of days later, John and Abby dropped by unannounced. The entire night was Abby trying to bring up the wedding, John trying to change the subject, and Abby not allowing that. We talk logistics because I'm helping them get some good deals through some professional contacts I have when finally she just says, "So I was talking to mom. She said that you can walk me down the aisle and she'll do the dance, or you can dance and she'll walk. It's your call, but you need to choose soon." I reiterated that I could not dance. She tried arguing that I had danced a little at my wedding, but I made it clear that it was different, and that I did not feel comfortable walking her. She got upset and said, "Mom loves me, why can't you?" My son and I were alone later. He looked exhausted. There was a new problem. Abby had decided in her head that I did not mean what I had been saying and was just doing it for Sally. He told me he would handle it. Ron Howard. He did not. So now I get text messages from Abby every couple of days acting like we have a secret relationship Sally doesn't know about. She even called herself my secret daughter and loved. She invited my wife to lunch, saying, 2 out of 3 of his girls going out. She has even started using the pressure of showing up at events like a recent barbecue to play a certain image. She hugs me more and holds it. She wants to take pictures with just me or my wife and me, but there are always a few with just me to post with captions I do not like. I asked him if he was upset with me, and he said no. He just wished it was different. He said we're good, but he's worried he and Sally aren't. I suggested premarital counseling. He said he would talk about it. Last night, They sent me an email with 3 styles of father-daughter dances and song options, so I'm not feeling any more respected or heard than before. We are supposed to meet on Friday, and Sally's partner and I have a bet about how bad it will be. So onward and upward. I hope your father's had a less dramatic day than I did, and by any chance, does anyone know exactly how bad of a crime I must commit to enter witness protection? Just curious.
My husband took all my savings fund because it was a marital property and used it for partying. Now he's wallowing down in the gutter. My husband is out of work. He does odd jobs around town to bring in a few $100s a month. I am employed, but the job doesn't pay well and saving money is hard. A few months ago we had a birth control failure and now we are expecting. Saving money became an even bigger priority for me. My husband seemed to want to spend more because he said my pregnancy was causing him stress and activating his anxiety and depression, and partying helped. He says all of that will be over when the baby comes. Anyway, my husband received a really generous job offer recently. He decided to use the money I had been saving. He figured he could replace it with the first several paychecks. He never contributed a penny to that savings fund. Husband claims that since we're married, it was our money and he had every right to it. The job offer fell through. The husband then admitted he took my money. It took me months to scrape that together, and he blew it in 2 weeks. His friends have been telling me that I'm not allowed to be upset because we're married, so that money was marital property. I have also been told that my husband needed the money more than I did because it helped him cope, and I should just be glad he partied instead of worse. The husband said that he would not touch any future savings for the baby's sake. It all came to a head last weekend when my husband ran out of cigs. I ended up scrounging change to buy his packs so he could make it until I got paid. My husband did not believe that I was broke. While I was at work on Monday, he went through our apartment to look for any money I may have hidden. He found $20 in a winter coat I had in storage that I had forgotten about. He also logged into my online banking and saw I had money in my account, but that money was earmarked for a bill. He called my work twice to yell at me and then chewed me out when I got home. He told me that I was a liar and that I withheld something that he needed. I tried to explain that I had no clue that there was any money in my winter clothing and that my bank account was for a bill. He didn't care. At least 2 of his friends have told me that I could have paid the bill a few days late if it meant supporting my husband while he's going through so much. This morning, my husband told me that since I'm a liar and willing to hide things from him, he doesn't feel like he needs to pay back the money that he took until I stop being such an a-hole to him. I really wasn't lying. As far as I am concerned, bill money is non-negotiable. Am I the a-hole for not telling him about the bill money? Update. My husband partied a little too hard and got himself arrested this morning. Due to previous behavior, he will have to sit in jail for a few weeks while they sort things out. You've all given me things to think about, and the universe has given me time to mull them over. Update 2. Unbeknownst to me, my husband was addicted to substances. His friends, who were all on his side, were also doing substance with him. Here's my update on that situation. My, now ex-husband was contemplating getting rid of us both. His getting arrested that weekend in 2020 saved my life. I've had low contact with my family. My best friend helped me get a new job. I met some people who helped me get a better place. My ex is still wallowing down in the gutter, but at least he didn't take us with him. My daughter was born safe, happy, and loved. Life isn't perfect, but it's much better than it used to be. I overheard my future mother-in-law calling me stupid, and my fiancé laughed. Now, I am considering leaving him. I am engaged to John. We are together for 5 years. We want to get married in July 2025. I always thought that his family liked me because we got along well. He has 2 older brothers, both married. Honestly, I was very excited to have them all as my in-laws. They were always kind to me. Some important information. About a year ago, when I was scrolling on Instagram, I saw a cringy but cute profile. It was an older woman's profile who shared inspirational quotes. I remember one post with something like, "Only stupid people pretend to know everything. Don't pretend, just ask." Honestly, this quote changed me in a lot of ways. Before that, I was always worried that I might embarrass myself if I didn't know something, and after reading that quote, I realized that if I always pretend that I know everything, then I'll miss out on learning about things. So, I decided to change my habits and admit that sometimes I don't know. Someone is talking about the war in Kosovo? Okay, but first, let me ask some questions to understand what we're discussing. And I ask a lot of questions sometimes. I sometimes even open the Notes app and write in some questions that I later want to find answers to. I don't do it around people I just met. I rarely do it at parties or other gatherings. I usually do it with people close to me who I think wouldn't judge me, or with people who specifically know something and are willing to share it. If I'm a part of a conversation, I'm not rude or interrupting. I usually just ask 1 or 2 questions. If a discussion is about climate change, I'm not asking about monkeys, if you know what I'm saying. I'm also not a complete dumbass. I don't ask questions that generally would be considered dumb to other people. I just write in the notes and check answers later on the internet. I'm capable of reading, so I make good use of it. But after all, I still ask a lot of questions. I know that sometimes I might come across as annoying. Now, let's move on to the problem. His parents hosted a small weekend barbecue for the entire family. I was the last person who showed up because I had to work late. I entered the house, and when walking towards the back into the backyard, I heard John's mom talking about me. Honestly, she wasn't talking about me. She was more like mocking me. I heard her say in a high-pitched voice, "How does the sun work? Where should I put the fork? Why does nobody like me? How do I wipe my butt?" I just stood there. I had this sinking feeling. I couldn't move, so I just stood there, and I heard them all laughing. One of the wives said, "I don't mind her always asking questions. I think it's cute," and it made me feel hopeful that they would say something like, "Yeah, sure, we're just playing. We love that," but none of them did. Instead, the mom replied, "It's not cute, she's just stupid." After that, they laughed again. I heard John laughing. My heart broke at that moment because he didn't even say anything positive. He didn't defend me. He just laughed. I quietly turned around and left the house. I texted John that I got sick and had to stay home. Now, I'm wondering how I should approach this situation. We live together, and I sleep in the guest bedroom for now. I use the excuse that I don't want him to get sick from being around me. I can't ignore him forever and pretend to be sick anymore because it's been too long. I'm not sure how to proceed. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. I'm considering talking to them about this, but I'm also worried they won't be honest with me. I can't marry him if he thinks I'm stupid, but I also can't marry into a family who thinks so little of me. But maybe it was a joke, and I shouldn't take it so seriously. I'm so torn apart, and every day, I convince myself a bit more that it's okay and that sometimes we should all laugh about ourselves. Now I feel like I'm just going crazy. I would appreciate some advice.
Teachers, what did you do that made your students call you the worst teacher ever? I knew I had a problem when I looked into the face of my childhood best friend and couldn't remember her name. It didn't just stop with friends, though. I began walking into the class I've taught for over 15 years, and blank at the sight of a concept I used to tell people was the easiest thing on earth. The students who used to fight each other to get a seat in my class started to roll their eyes at me whenever I would stammer in front of them like an elderly man who couldn't find their cane, despite only being in my mid-30s. But I let myself become too overconfident, and that's what started the biggest downfall known to man. After a long relaxing summer, I realized I needed to try to work on my plans for the next semester. But when I did, I realized nothing was coming up for me. I tried for weeks to conjure up anything at all, but it felt like there was huge dusty cobwebs in my head, and nothing could save me from the embarrassment I felt when I stood in front of my class, stuttering and blanking out. I ended up sending everyone home early that day because even the sound of my own voice was stressing me out. I gave it another try the next class, but it happened all over again. My brain couldn't recognize any of this content, even though I had taught for years, so I looked around and picked on the first person I saw. I told them if they did their reading, they'd know this topic, so I asked them to answer some questions in front of everyone. Luckily, they actually did the reading, which helped me try to pick up on where I left off. I knew I made myself public enemy number one by the end of class though, as the students shot daggers at me throughout the whole class. It didn't just end there, though, as the worst was yet to come. I had to resort to using AI to help me write something down. When I would walk into class, I could feel something had shifted in the atmosphere. The same students who liked my classes started to seem frustrated with me, especially whenever I would go into a stuttering fit. As time went on, it started to take me longer to sit down and concentrate on grading my students' papers. Sometimes, I would be so sick and tired of staring at the same page all day that I would give random 100s to every student. I'd even doodle little stick figures on their pages to try to get them to like me. But every time I handed their papers out, they'd start whining about the differences in their grades. Eventually, everyone started to give me terrible reviews on Rate My Professor, begging me to take some Adderall so that I'd make sense in class because they had no clue what I was talking about. I was losing my memory, and it was stressing me out to the point where I considered resigning. I started to dedicate more of my free time to trying to relearn everything, including trying to staple the information on my forehead. But every attempt of trying to get better was followed by me teaching so terribly that I would end up looking like a traumatized soldier from Vietnam. By the middle of the semester, I knew I had to change something, or I'd completely waste a semester for these students. So I went straight to Googling every single thing I felt. I scrolled through 50 links until I finally found something interesting on a forum post. A teacher had posted about how she was so burnt out she was starting to forget basic math. It was like I found myself in a post, but the comments were full of people begging them to retire. However, one person said that they heard of a study from a university about some mushrooms that help with your memory and concentration, and even help out with your immune system. I was a little wary of anything to do with mushrooms after I saw Freak Bob with them back in my frat boy years, but I decided to look into it. The results weren't talking about blazing up. There were actually a ton of academic articles about their uses in modern home remedies, the most popular one being flow state mushroom. Coffee. I decided to order some, and when it came I changed my morning coffee. I noticed I was slowly able to think a little longer than 5 minutes, so I decided to try again the next day, and the next day, until a week had passed, and I felt entirely different. When I tried to remember the content I had to teach for my lectures, it came to me quickly, as if it had never left. It felt like I knew everything in the universe again, just like I used to when I first started teaching. If I got any smarter, I'd need to get a lobotomy like Sister Sage to keep me in check with the rest of society. I was able to go into detail about the subjects, to the point where I went 5 minutes over the end of the class because I had so much to add. I even had enough energy after class to plan out the lesson plans for the next 2 weeks instead of just recycling the same plans. And for the first time in a while, my students trusted me to ask questions about the content. I spent the next couple of hours working through my huge stack of papers that I had been putting off for weeks. When I looked at them, I noticed the mistakes right away, and instead of spiraling, I made a note of everything that each student struggled with and added some explanations for each one of them. When I handed my students their papers, I could see their shock from a mile away because I hadn't given them their papers back all semester. I wouldn't be surprised if some of their parents sued me for endangering their endless potential. Although I felt like crap for making them wait for so long, I felt better when I saw the relief on their faces from my detailed explanations on their papers because for once, they understood what was going on. My students started coming in early just to chat with me for more things to learn, and they weren't reporting me online, which means I successfully groomed them into being the perfect teacher's pets. And when I passed out the next test, I didn't see them panic as hard as they used to. Their test scores even shot up, which ended the long streak of 50s. To be honest, I was just happy to be managing my workload better, and it helped that my Flow State mushroom coffee was more effective than drinking regular coffee, since it did more than just keep me awake. It also kept me from giving out 100s like they were freebies. Edit. Since a lot of you were asking where I got the Flow State mushroom coffee from, it's called Clarity Brew, search it up.